But I do want to point out the marketplace. I think this is a really important aspect of Unreal Engine. And specifically, there's a couple. Of course, it's going to jump around on me. One of the things that I've recently been playing with that I think is a really amazing tool is Ultra Dynamic Sky. So if you come into the marketplace, bring this down here too. If we come in here and we type in Ultra maybe my keyboard's being really sticky, and I actually think it's the search that's coming through here is that it's looking up every time I type, it has to search it. So if I go into Ultra Dynamic Sky, there's an add-in here. It does cost money. It's not free, but the effects that you can get out of it are hands down really amazing. Like I think it's worth kind of every penny. If you're going to be working in Unreal with kind of realistic lighting and scenes like that, this has been a huge time saver and is, as in my opinion, kind of the best way to go about getting realistic lighting. So with that, I can launch 5.0.3. Anyway, so pretty much where we left off of last class, I think that I just had all of this hidden. We had our floor. We had, I think, 3 out of the 4 balls. So one of the things that I went and did is I created a chrome material up here, and I'm referring to William. I think his last name is Fauchier, and he uses this method to really make sure that his lighting is good. And so we can see there's, with the blacks and the grays and the whites, we get a kind of a nice gradient there. And then with the chrome, we can see we're starting to get some of this atmosphere. One of the other things that I've done in this scene is I've brought in what's known as Ultra Dynamic Sky and Ultra Dynamic Weather, and both of these are part of that plugin. So if we come into our library here, after you download it, it'll show up in kind of your vault, and you can click Add to Project. And then this will let you kind of push this plugin, I guess, into another one of your projects, so that you kind of see, you can see those objects and they show up in your scene. So I'm just going to say don't add because I've already added them in. But where they would show up now is over here in my content browser. I now have a folder called Ultra Dynamic Sky, and that was created when I said add to project. I then came into my blueprints, and I just drug out the Ultra Dynamic Sky and the Ultra Dynamic Weather. And I do want to showcase these just a little bit because they're super awesome. So you don't have to use both at the same time, but if you do drag both of them, they actually work in parallel. So the Ultra Dynamic Sky is going to grab some of its settings from the Ultra Dynamic Weather and the other way around, which is kind of nice. So if I click on that and I go to my details, I have a ton of different settings. So if we remember in Twinmotion, and this is again where Unreal Engine is really going to kind of stand apart, is that in Twinmotion we just had kind of one generic slider that let us change the weather from either like clear sky to like rainy or snowy, and then one slider that let us change like the weather and or the season, I guess, throughout the year. In some cases that's enough. Like that'll get you everything that you need for your rendering. But in some cases you want to go a lot further, and that's where you would want to make the distinction of taking your project out of Twinmotion and putting it in Unreal, because in here we can see we have a ton of different settings that we can really tweak and really dial in to be exactly what we want. So under the simulation tab here, I think this is a pretty important one. I click on simulate real sun, real moon, and real stars. And then I also I check my location here for latitude and longitude, time zone, kind of year. I guess it's not 2021, it's 2022. So change this, and then you can also come in to the location presets and kind of find one that meets kind of close to where you're at. So we're playing with a Farnsworth house. It's outside of Chicago, so I can click on that, and it'll kind of push all of these into that. It'll push the Chicago location into these settings. But we can see we have a ton of different, really maybe too many settings in some cases. But the fun part is that let's say you don't want to have to go through all of those. If I go to my outliner and I click on my ultra dynamic weather, I can come up here and they have a whole bunch of presets. So let's say I want it to be like a clear sky day. I can kind of come around and look around my nice clear sky now. I've got a little bit of a moon out, which is cool because it's simulating this based on kind of real world information. Another thing that I'm probably going to do is, I'll just show you some of these other presets. So we can go to like rain, for example, and now we can see we have a particle system that actually produces rain. And the really cool part about this is that it has a collider so that you'll be able to see kind of the raindrops splashing on the ground. So if I turn my Farnsworth house back on, we can see we're getting like raindrops on the grass. That's probably not the most realistic way that rain falls onto grass. But in case of like the roof, and it looks like our collisions aren't set up properly. So it's just using the ground for now. Anyway, that's again, today's kind of I'm just rolling downhill, I guess, here. And, trying to make something out of the disaster that the way the class started out. Sorry, everyone. Again, back to the ultra dynamic weather, back into the details. There's a whole bunch of fun stuff here. So let's say we want rain with thunderstorms. We can kind of come up here, and the reason I'm doing this because I wanted to show kind of how impressive this particle system is, because it's actually building a whole bunch of these little frames for me so that I can see in this simulation, if I unselect the rain, I don't need to have all of those pieces of geometry flying around, but it's really impressive as to how well all of this stuff is put together so that it does look as realistic as possible. One of the other settings on this that are kind of fun, so if we come back into our ultra dynamic sky, I'm going to take that time of day, make it a little bit darker out, perhaps, and we can see we've got some lightning out on the horizon. And what I might do is come back into my outliner and hide this background. We can see it a little bit better. This effect is really impressive to me. The amount of time I've spent trying to set stuff like this up and not having it work in previous versions is kind of phenomenal. Of that, it just does what when you click on it. For it to be that kind of simple as a tool is really where I think this is kind of worth its weight in gold. They have a whole bunch of different snow presets, all the way from like a light snow to a blizzard. And the nice thing about this too is because now that we're in Unreal, once we create imagery out of this will show up. If we recall from Twinmotion, is that once we went into like our path tracer, we lost a lot of our environmental effects. So kind of a cool thing about this is that you don't lose all of your environmental effects, because essentially you're creating a path traced rendering I guess technically it's not, quote, path traced, but you're creating a real-time render where you don't have to actually sit and wait for that render to bake out. So I'm going to choose like a cloudy or overcast day here. Again, if I come down into my 3 balls, I can see that my lighting is pretty well set up, and the reason for that is that I've done quite a bit of tweaking to my lighting here. And the best way to do that I've found is if we come in here to window, please hold. There is, where is that? Oh my gosh. Environment light mixer. There we go. Oh my. Sorry. So if we click on this environment light mixer, one of the first things that I'll do is up here is I'll click on normal mode just so that I have kind of everything exposed. And from here I have kind of a one-stop shop for most of my lighting settings that I want to deal with. I'm not trying to move my light at all here, and we can see what that actor is called in our kind of details pane or in our outliner. So if we're looking for what object is affecting all of our lighting, this is a really great way to kind of come through here. So a couple of things that I wanted to play with at first were, if we remember from like the inspirational photo, there's a couple of like these light shafts, or that sometimes are called like God rays, or the technical term for it is kind of slipping my mind right now. But I wanted to be able to enable those, and I guess it's probably impossible to see that right now. So I'm going to come into my ultra dynamic sky. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to make the time of day a little bit earlier. And I'm also going to come into my fog and turn this down. Oh, that's controlled by the weather. Oh no, that worked. Okay, great. So I do want a little bit of fog. I want some atmospheric fog, but I don't want so much that I can't see the sun. So we get a little bit right there. And so if we're kind of, where is that sun? I thought I saw it. There it is. So if we're standing here, we can see we get that kind of nice light ray that comes through. And the way that we got that was coming into our environment light mixer. I clicked on light shaft occlusion is 1. And then I can also click on light shaft bloom as well. And we can see a little bit of how that starts to affect our scene. And the way that it's interacting with this is actually very impressive, because it's using that fog as like a particle system, and that fog is actually collecting the light shafts that are coming through, which is very similar to like real world physics. You're gonna see that is how like, I guess the world works. That's how we see fog and stuff. Another nice thing too is I like to kind of stand back so that I can see all these 3 spheres and make sure all of these are kind of working to my advantage. Or not to my advantage, that I'm leveraging them so that I can understand what the lighting is actually doing in terms of highs and darks, and if it's too low or too soft. Another thing that I've done in this scene that I think is really important to point out, and this is why I wanted to kind of re-import that other Twinmotion scene, is that in here there's a default sky or light that comes in with the scene. And so if your scene isn't looking correct, it's probably because you have 2 suns essentially. So there's going to be the Twinmotion sky and then the Unreal Engine sky. And so I like to kind of separate both of those out and delete the Twinmotion one, because we're in Unreal now. We have a lot better tools we can use, and we can make it look a lot better. Another tweak that I've done in this scene here is that I came into my starter content. And then I came over into materials, and I'm pretty sure there's a glass in here, and I use this M glass material for the glass. And the way that I applied that is I left click and just drag that over to my glass. And so I get a little bit, I think, a more realistic looking glass here than if I came into my Twinmotion glass, and I'll try to bring that back just so I can show you the difference here. So we're going to come in here to that, and I'm in my Twinmotion aspect of my content browser right now. And so these are all the materials that were brought in when I imported Twinmotion, the Twinmotion file, which is nice that it does this. But now I can't find my glass, which is not fun. Glass, clear glass, here we go. Thank you. So we can see this is what the glass was like from Twinmotion. And we can see where, if we remember, when we weren't path tracing, if we come up in here to our lit and we go to path tracing, it looks a lot better after we do this. But we don't want to have to path trace our scene. We want to make it look really good with just our regular lit scene. And so this glass to me looks a little bit too foggy, a little bit too cartoony. And that's where I came into just my starter content, which I was a decision I made when I first built this scene. If you remember, it says, do you want to, when you're making this, do you want to include the starter content? And I said yes. And so from there, I came down into my M glass and dropped that in. And that already to me looks, I mean, that's kind of night and day from what we had before. The other thing that I do want to go over a little bit is I might actually jump back into our environment light mixer, and I want to go through a couple more of these settings. So we've enabled our light shaft and our light shaft bloom. We can actually adjust a few of these other kind of tweaks to give us kind of strengthen that God ray effect. As we can see here, this might be a little bit too strong, but I don't know, it's kind of cool actually. But maybe this is too much, but it's nice that we can actually have a direct effect on that pretty quickly. Because I do believe in our inspiration, there was quite a bit of that coming through, and then we have a couple of other pieces we can play with there. If we keep scrolling down, we're going to see we have some ray tracing settings, and the atmosphere sunlight I think is another good one to make sure that you have. We can actually cast shadows on our clouds. We have our sky is kind of blown out right now, so we can't really see too many clouds, so we don't have to do that. Kind of the more of these you enable, if you think about it, you're going to take a little bit of a performance hit, but because we're not running in VR where someone is going to see that kind of stuttering, I'm not too worried about it. So I'm just kind of going for all the stuff that I think is going to make the most pretty scene. If we keep scrolling down, we see we have another ultra dynamic sky. So this is a little bit confusing at first. So we have what appears to be two of the same things. But essentially what it is there's just two different, I guess I would maybe refer to them as containers that are created by Ultra Dynamic Sky that then lets you kind of go through and affect both of them individually. But in essence, there's going to be one that's going to do most of the kind of heavy lifting, and then the other one is a little bit of redundancy. So you'll see that as you go through that, if you're playing with Ultra Dynamic Sky, is that one of these is going to give you a lot bigger bang for your buck. But I did want to point that out because it can get a little bit confusing sometimes when you're looking to know which one you're actually looking at. And so as I'm turning this on and off, it's not actually doing a whole lot for my scene. I get a little bit of like a tweakage over here, but it's not affecting too much in terms of my overall scene. So I'm just gonna leave that there. One thing to note now that I've turned all of that up, I can see that it looks like my color spheres are not looking very good. So that is a good indication that I have something kind of blown out too far. And again, this is a little bit of dynamic lighting. So now I can see that I've kind of warmed up and softened all of the light above this ground plane quite a bit. And if we remember from the inspiration photo, that's actually what I want. I don't want it to feel kind of cold or too crispy. I wanted it to feel like this warm, kind of thick atmosphere, this kind of cascading through the whole scene type of feel. I'm also going to up my fog just a little bit more, I think. Here we go. So then, after you can come through all of these different environment light mixer scenes and setup, and maybe I'll jump over into a blank template so we can kind of show how to do that with the out of the box sun and sky as well. But for now, I want to just go over a few more settings that got me to having this look a little bit better than what we had in Twinmotion. So if I hit G, I can kind of turn off my game actors here. And it looks, I mean, it's starting to look pretty good, I think. The lighting's a lot closer to where we wanted it. Our elements are looking pretty real here. This floor texture definitely needs some work, but I'm not going to go through that too much. And then the scene and the lighting that we have kind of coming through, again, this is really extreme right now, but we're going for something more artistic rather than straight realistic. So kind of coming back in here, looking back at our scene, thinking about our inspiration. I like how kind of warm and soft this is starting to feel. The next thing that I was looking at, or that is important to play with, is this post-process volume. And so in my details, there's a couple of things that were changed. And so my outliner here, if I turn this off or on, it looks really subtle, and because it is. But when I export this, it's going to look much better when I have this post-process volume kind of working. And so a few of the details, again, the main one was that to make sure that under the post-process volume settings is that infinite extent and unbound is checked so that it's affecting your entire scene. But a couple of the things that I went through is I did not add a dirt mask for this. I did add a little bit of chromatic aberration. And as we really crank that, we can see what that effect is like. This looks really trippy. Like we have like 3D goggles on or something. But I just want just a touch. Just a touch. And this is all stuff too that you could do in like DaVinci Resolve or something else like afterwards. I actually turned off my exposure settings, which I thought was pretty kind of an interesting thing here to note, is that my cube map exposure is no longer affecting my environment, and that's an effect of the ultra dynamic sky having more control over my lighting than my post-processing volume. I could come in here and go to like image 3, and from here, if we all remember, now that I'm in image 3, I can affect my exposure separately as a camera versus as that post-process kind of scene. A couple of the other things that I went through, I did add a little bit of film grain in this. which I think is nice, especially when you're exporting, because everything has like a little bit of a tooth to it, so it can just makes it feel a little bit more real. And this is all personal preference, but I do recommend kind of going through each one of these and kind of playing around with them. I do want to show everyone one thing that I think is really, really kind of a nice effect in, or a useful tool in here, is if I come over to my actors and I type in up here, I'm going to type in camera. I'm going to type in Syn camera actor, which is a camera actor, but it's meant to work like a cinematic camera. So it's a little bit different than what we had up here with just our regular camera actor. So if I bring that in, I'm going to kind of drop that down, raise it up a little bit. I'm going to rotate it around so that I can actually see the Farnsworth house. Maybe. Come on, rotation. There we go there. Come back to move. I'm going to pull it back. Quite a bit actually, I think. Ooh, that's too far back. I'm going to raise it up just a little bit. So this has quite a bit of a different effect because it is the way that it's going to be handling the lighting and the scene is a little bit different. The other thing about it is that it is, if I click on this, I can come in here. I can change some post-processing just within that. But if I come into my camera settings, I can actually change which film I'm on. I think we went over this a little bit last time. But if I went to like a 16:9 DSLR, it's looking a little bit better, I guess, to me. I'm going to bring this up maybe to about there. And I'll just bring that right over there. Okay. And then I can come into this Cinematic Camera Actor 5, and I can see that I've already, this again starts to feel quite a bit different than what we had with our Twinmotion camera, which I think was image 3, and accidentally moved that around on me. So we can see there's quite a bit of a different feel in between both of these views, and that's based on those camera settings. Again, the post-processing volume is affecting the whole scene, but you also have a whole bunch of settings within the camera itself that's going to affect each view. This is really useful for taking like cameras that are looking into the sun and or looking south and looking north, or in a dark interior space versus a bright exterior space. This is probably the best way to control that. And then your post-processing volume that's affecting the whole world globally kind of helps you set up like your colors and your tone and some of those other things that you want to have on every camera. Hopefully all of that makes sense. So if we were looking at the difference between the exterior and the interior space, we're gonna have a much. Ooh, that's not good. How did I mess that up? Oh, is that just a weird reflection I'm getting? Oh, that's odd. Sorry, I thought I messed up the model in the closet, out of the closet. So, yeah, much different kind of feel and vibe for an interior, and this is probably the worst house that I could use to showcase the difference between an interior and an exterior, because this is pretty much an inside house. There's kind of like a little bit of a voyeuresque vibe to this house. So you're really not inside when you're inside. So anyway, hopefully everyone gets my point there. I kind of quit yammering about that. What else did I play with in here? Sorry, I'm just trying to go through, because I couldn't kind of start from scratch like I was planning to. I just want to come through and make sure that I have all of the elements that I did tweak and change to kind of get this effect figured out here. Okay, I think that's just about it. There's one last and kind of major thing that I'd like to point out too in Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine just in general, is that I have a player start actor in here. And so if I click on this play button, it's actually going to start the game, I guess, is the way to think about it. And so now I don't have to click to look around at all. My mouse moves around, and then my arrow keys kind of send me around the project. And this is very, very similar to like playing a computer video game in terms of the motion and the controls. But it's essentially just compiling all of the settings that we have into the real-time renderer. It's really not that different from what we were seeing before. It's just a kind of a different way of looking at this. The times that I would use this is if I was going to have a VR scene, I would have to hit play or start to initialize that kind of VR character. Another kind of fun one is to like, we used to, or in Unreal, there's like a ball burp gun in one of the scenes, and you have like 3D characters. So we could load our projects into Unreal, and then we'd run around and we'd make sure we have collisions set for our geometry and stuff like that. But we could all run around and kind of blast each other with these burp guns. It was kind of funny, and that's probably the most use I've actually. I think that's the only time I've actually had to hit play in Unreal is when we were actually playing a game that wasn't work related. It was just, I guess it was somewhat work related, but it wasn't a way to like showcase our design. It was a way for us just to kind of goof around. The biggest kind of pitfall that I found with letting your client do this is that every time I would have at least one client that would just do this. And they're like, oh, I'm stuck. And it's like, okay, where are you? And they're like, I don't know, I'm looking at the ground. And you're like, okay, what's going on? And they're like camping out. You know, it's like, I have no idea where you are either, man. So then you're like kicking the bushes to try to help them find their way out of the weeds. And then you've lost, 5-10 minutes out of an important meeting where everyone's kind of paying to be there. So I can just hit escape to get out of that. It's going to show a ton of different issues with this. So it looks like I have some skeletal mesh constraint errors. I'm not too worried about this. Again, I've never really had anyone load themselves into this space as like from a client's perspective. And I think this will change once like the younger generation starts to be the owner of a company and is the developer. I could definitely see it where kind of the generation of people who grew up with like a video game or their friends had video games are going to receive this a lot better. But for the time being, most clients are going to be like my parents' age, or how old is that? 60s, 70s. They're like kind of the boomer generation. They're the ones now who are running most of the development in the world. So it'll all change. Anyway, enough of that. Let me think. What else here? I don't think I want to get too far into blueprints or really going over too much more than this. Because again, I want to kind of make this kind of the short and sweet of things, and how do we get kind of the biggest bang for our buck out of importing this scene, getting something that looks, I think, significantly better than Twinmotion, and and not being bogged down by too many of the little details and kind of getting into the weeds there. So I'm just going through my checklist here. Bring the model, check the lighting, check the post-processing volume, add our spheres, adjust the sky. Okay, yeah, that's really about it. So that's it. I'm sorry, you could probably just hear me reading those out loud. Those are like the things I would do first almost every time. Import the Twinmotion model, eliminate the Twinmotion lighting elements that I don't want. In some cases, I might have some interior lighting and I want that to show up, but I want to delete out my environment lighting out of the Twinmotion model. Then I'm going to set up my own environment lighting. I'm going to create my 4 spheres, or my 4 spheres. And then I'm going to start tweaking all of those light settings. And that's pretty much going to take me almost all of the way that I need to go. That really should be enough to kind of get there, I guess. We can see here just a couple of different cameras that are set up that have different lighting applied to them. I think this is a little bit nicer of a balance, but I'm losing some of the detail on the inside here, which I don't like. Which is where it was, again, each one of these has like a little bit of a different vibe to it. So all of that can be tweaked to everyone's kind of scene and their own discretion. But I feel like this is almost, except for the ground, almost exactly like what we were looking at in our inspiration photo. And I can close this. And then I can open up my other one that wasn't wanting to load the Twinmotion folder. Oh, there was one other thing that I was going to show is some of these other add-ins, and Quixel Bridge is another great one. Quixel Bridge will pretty much just allow you to access all of the things from Quixel within your scene. So if you hit this quickly add, you'll see Quixel Bridge here. This will open up the bridge, it'll sign you in, and then it'll let you kind of search over that. I think I touched on that briefly, but wanted to kind of bring that up again. So within here, how do we get something similar to like what we had in that previous scene? For one, I have to find where my sun is at. So I want my sun to be a little bit closer to the horizon. I want to make sure that I have kind of my light shafts and stuff like that enabled, and I want to add in a fog. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up in here to window. I'm just going to make sure that my environment light mixer, I'm going to set this to normal, so now you can see here, instead of it saying ultra dynamic skies, it says sun sky, which is directly related over here. So these are kind of the default sun and sky elements. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to click on light shaft occlusion and light shaft bloom, and I'm going to crank up the bloom scale just a little bit, I think. Okay. And then I'm going to come into my sun and my sky, and I'm going to go to my details, and I'm just going to change the time. So that I have a little bit lower sun. And I can tell now that my bloom is way too high, so I can come back into my window, come back into my environment light mixer, and if I turn this bloom scale back down, we can see kind of what that's doing in terms of it. And I think 0.05 is, or maybe 0.01 is even enough. That looks good to me for now. Okay, I think I keep coming down here. Ray tracing, distance field shadows. These are stuff that I don't have to keep playing with. Sun and sky. Again, we see a few of these duplicates. These are kind of different packets within the sun and sky. So you can see we kind of have a whole bunch of stuff is actually going on inside of this sun sky. So it's good to kind of go through and make sure that most of this stuff has just been kind of double checked. Then we have our volumetric cloud and our exponential height fog, and these are going to get us kind of the next couple of settings here that we're going to want to play with. And we're actually going to do that for our exponential height fog. One thing we want to make sure we have checked is that volumetric fog is turned on. And essentially what this is going to do is, rather than it just looking like it's foggy by kind of faking it in, volumetric fog will actually create different particles so that those particles can catch the light differently, and this will have a huge improvement on the kind of realistic view of your scene. It's a similar thing to how we had these are volumetric clouds up here. When we move the sun around, we can see how these cast different shadows. We want to do the same thing with our volumetric fog. And I have to come back into my outliner to get there. So I can go to my exponential height fog, and I can then go into my details here, and I can change this fog density to be a little bit heavier to just kind of warm up that scene again, from like the cold without any fog. Another nice thing that this does is if I turn this all the way off, we can see how we have the abysmal void of the ground. An exponential height fog will give you just a little bit of kind of fuzz for your background so that you don't see that kind of crisp line that you would get in like the post-apocalyptic world of most modeling environments, like in Revit. There's, you look out, the building looks kind of sparse because there's no objects in the background. The Earth isn't like that. Anyway, don't have to go too much further into that. So I'm going to just bring up that density a little bit. And my fall off, I actually want to leave pretty far down. You can see that what this is doing is I'm pretty much in a giant fog bank right now. If I pull that fall off back out, then now I just have like a really low ground level of fog, and the rest of the sky is pretty clear. But I want just a little bit of both. And then what I would do is I would come into my post-processing volume and start to tweak some of the things within here. So again, my temperature, I would turn this on, and I'd turn that temp, just give it a little bit warmer. We can go really warm, like this is like a desert, but just a little bit warmer. And that's pretty much all of the major light settings that I would do to kind of replicate the ultra dynamic skies. So on top of Quixel and all of their wonderful objects, I also want to point out Substance 3D, which is a really Substance is actually a really interesting source of materials. If you're looking for materials and textures for any of your renderings for any scene, you can even kind of take these and put them into like a Revit material. I don't recommend that because you're not gonna it's not gonna look as good in a Revit render. But Substance 3D makes some really amazing texture packs and kind of objects. As you can see, it works with a lot of different pieces of software. If we come in here to like all assets, we can see there's a really high quality. So this is a really nice way to be able to look for materials, textures, that kind of thing that you can use in your rendering. So I did want to bring that up as well, because there is a plugin so you can bring all of the substance materials into your scene.